Okay, hello and welcome everybody. We're just going to give everyone 30 seconds to join and then we will kick things off and get started. But thank you for joining us this afternoon. Awesome. Looks like people are trickling in. Again, we're just going to give everyone a few moments to get virtually settled and then we'll kick things off. Okay, 101, let's get started. For those who aren't aware, we are recording this session. We're going to send it out to everybody who registered. Feel free to distribute to anybody else on your team or in your network that you think would find this valuable. We will be sending out the recordings in the next sort of 24, 48 hours after the webinar ends. A few housekeeping things. I think first good place to start is introductions. So my name is Jordan Fox. I head up the sales team for EarthCache at Skywatch. I'm joined by a couple friends. I have Mark, who heads up our customer success and support teams. I have David, who is our chief product officer, and we have Kelly, who heads up our marketing. The agenda is fairly straightforward. We are going to be showing you, well, first we'll table set for those who aren't familiar with Skywatch, who we are, what we do, and then we're going to spend the majority of our time looking at our most recent product launch of EarthCache Enterprise. I will be doing the large majority of the talking, so you're stuck with me. However, if you have questions for anybody on the team, feel free to ask away in the Q&A segment you have on your Zoom module, or use the chat as well. For my fellow panelists, feel free to jump in, add color commentary at any point for anything that I miss or that you think would be valuable. So let's kick it off. For anybody who doesn't know, we always like to start here just so we're all on the same page of who Skywatch is and what we're doing. In a nutshell, we aim to simplify a very complex industry. For any person or organization who's trying to access remote sensing data, or specifically commercial satellite imagery, we want to make that process easy. There is a whole bunch of challenges that exist between somebody saying, I want access to data, and actually getting access to that data in a simple way. And in a non-exhaustive list, that's contracting and licensing and pricing and the technical hurdles that exist between somebody wanting it and getting access to it in the amount that they need for their given project. So that's our mission and vision. We set out to make that simple for an organization and a person to get access to that. And we have a swath of our organization who spends every waking hour of their day ensuring that we have the supply of data that exists out there on our platform. And then the other half of our company is working on making it simple for you as an end user or an organization to get access to it. Another way to look at it, and we like to make sure we include this slide because oftentimes it can be overlooked, is that we want to become your single access point to optical data, hyperspectral data, SAR data, stereo data, whatever you need for your project from a remote sensing standpoint. We want to be your one-stop shop for all things remote sensing. So as our business has evolved, a new set of problems started to emerge, particularly within organizations where there's more than a handful of people working on a project that involves imagery of some sort. And the problems that we saw were sort of bucketed as such. And the first is in acquisition. It's hard enough to work with a single data provider and make sure that you have the bandwidth to do the contracting, licensing, pricing, and technical wherewithal to make sure the data is actually flowing into your organization. But multiply that by the amount of organizations and companies who are putting satellites into orbit, and that can become quite a big problem. And so that was something that we set out to solve on an organizational level for companies. The second was, when organizations get data, what do you do with it? Where do you store it? How do you make it accessible for those who need it? How do you make it discoverable for those who don't know that they need it or want it? How do you make sure that you're maximizing the usage of that data, therefore increasing the benefit of the acquired data that you've purchased? The last piece is, for stakeholders across the organization, how do you make it easy for people to distribute? For somebody who's a geospatial expert, that can involve integrating this data into whatever geospatial system that they're using. For a non-geospatial person, how do we make it easy for a stakeholder to get access to a particular image that pertains to a project they're working on? So we started to imagine, and we started to hear this from our customers and prospects over and over again, that there was this sort of day in the life workflow that organizations were going through. A project would get identified within the organization and they'd say, hey, we need some new imagery for this project. The next thing is they'd say there's a project team that's involved in this. So there's different roles and permissions in terms of who can actually buy the data, who should have access to it and needs to work with the data, who just needs access to a pretty picture because they're somewhat on the edges of the project. So we set out to build some roles and permissions that allow an organization to build that project team. The next thing was, okay, go acquire the data. How do you do that? Once the data has been acquired, how do you deliver it to the stakeholders across a project? And then how do you store it on an ongoing basis to make sure that it's always easily accessible? The thing we kept hearing over and over again was staff turnover. When somebody who was involved in geospatial projects leaves an organization, it leaves a gaping hole with where is the data? Where are the projects? Who has the know-how and how to access that data is a problem we heard over and over again. So enter EarthCache Enterprise. And I would say this is one of the more exciting days we've had in a while, which either tells you something about my life or says that we're about to show you something very exciting. And that's EarthCache Enterprise here. So what you should be seeing right now is the Enterprise Archive home screen. And there is no single place to start a user journey within EarthCache Enterprise, but we've seen our early adopters typically use this as a starting point. What this is a global view of all the data that's been acquired for your organization. And it doesn't have to be through Skywatch. So the idea would be if you have data that's acquired from other sources that you'd like to integrate into this enterprise archive for your organization, you can do that. So you'll see that it's a fairly user-friendly interface. If I wanted to look into the data that's been acquired over a specific site, I can zoom in, I can click on the specific site and get information about the capture. It's going to give me details about what that data is. If I actually want to see it, I can click on this little arrow in the top left, and that's going to generate a direct view link. Direct view is actually another feature worth calling out. It's our simple one-click way that you within your organization can share data to any stakeholder through a link. So imagine somebody's on a project site, again, a non-geospatial user just wants access to that image that you captured, the final product. You can give them that link, and via email, whether they're on a tablet, their laptop, any device, they can click that link and have access to it. There's a suite of tools, simple tools that we're building out to complement the direct view. But really quickly, it gives you a geo-referenced capture of the image that this user is working on. It gives you ways to work with as an example, imagery exposure. So if there's things you can't see with the imagery exposure as it's set, you can use this and toggle it back and forth to actually change the exposure and see if that changes what you can see in the image. So backing up into the enterprise archive, that is typically where a user would start. Do I have data over the site I care about that already exists within my organization? This has resulted in organizations being able to deduplicate purchases. I want to know if we've already collected data from a different department or a different area of the business. How do I do that in an easy way? So if I've searched through my enterprise archive, I've either been inspired in terms of what I can do with data for my specific project, or I have realized that I don't have the data I need. The next thing you're going to do is say, I need to acquire some data. And the first place that people typically start is searching our archive. So for those not familiar with our archive, it's a place where really simply you can search for a specific location. It'll zoom in on the map. You can use our polygon drawing tools and pick the parcel that you really care about. So I'll just pick a random area of interest here. You can set the dates in terms of when you want that data to be captured from. So again, when the captures would start, when they would run up until, I could say, over the last year or so, I'd like to find some imagery over this particular area of interest. You can then filter by resolution type, percentage of area that you care is captured, and hit save and search. And what it's going to do is search across the whole catalog of archive that exists from our provider library. And it's going to give you anything that matches the parameters that you've set out. So user comes in, they search their enterprise archive, they don't see data that they need. They then search the provider archive, they look through options that exist for that area of interest. You can certainly set up the preview. It'll give you the cost, and you can order the image if it suits your needs. Let's say you're actually looking for either forward-facing captures or within the archive, there isn't the data that you need, so you have to go capture some fresh data. That would bring you to our order imagery button. And this is where we give you the capability to actually task a satellite over an area of interest. So I'll use the same area for fun because it's where we're located here. And I will use our polygon drawing tool again and just pick a small site. And you can decide what kind of imagery output you would like to capture. You're not limited to one particular output. If you do want to set up different captures using different imagery output types, you can do that. I'll just keep it simple today with a true color image. You can name your pipeline, as we call it, and say, this is my Waterloo site monitoring. So it's easy to describe. You also can use this tagging feature, which organizations will use if on a project level, they want further descriptors that can then tie that imagery capture back to a specific project. That's a typical function that organizations will use. Same way that we looked at before with our archive search, within resolution type, it's bucketed by low, medium, high, or very high resolution. And it's going to give you all the providers that fit within that specific bucket. So all the providers within high resolution will give you results here. And I can hit create, and that's going to create a pipeline that then actually goes and tasks a satellite over the area of interest I've highlighted, and it's going to start to bring me back results for my project. So great. You start to get some results from either a fresh task that you set out, or again, you've procured some new archive imagery. Your orders are then going to start to show up in your organization order tab. And what you can do from there is, first of all, actually look at the order that you've placed and examine the results. Great. The second thing you can do is create another direct view link. So same thing before, if I wanted to create a direct view link, share it to somebody in my project, that's easy to do in a couple clicks. And of course, that imagery that you just procured then becomes part of the enterprise archive for your organization. So if everyone's following along the user journey so far, the next thing it's worth calling out is there's an analytics tool that is measuring and monitoring all of this usage on the back end. Sorry, David, you're gonna unmute there.
No, I was just following along, Jordan. Did you want to also cover down on the API reference quickly?
Sure. Did you want to insert a blurb on the API piece of it?
Yeah, just to say that getting data from this environment into other applications and services can also be highly advantageous. So we provide both a fully documented and comprehensive API that covers all the functions we've shown in this web GUI now in a format that can be easily integrated into your application or web service. And of course, we also provide the blue and black arrow download facility to actually extract the data or export the data from the EarthCache environment into any remote storage or other enterprise application that you may be using.
Thanks, David. So further to that, as we mentioned on the enterprise analytics side, as your organization is procuring data, you have the ability to, for those who care, so this would be a system administrator type role, see the usage of that data across your organization. So you're able to see what data is being procured by source, your transaction history. The question we hear that's unanswerable for most time and time again is, do you know how much you're spending on data in any given period? And the answer is always, I have no clue. And in order to optimize for that, you need to know what you're spending on data to start with. So among many other things, what usage analytics allows you to do is get a handle on how much you're spending from project to department to organizations as a whole, and what data sources are the most efficient for you, and how can you optimize across the organization on your spend with data. Okay. Any questions so far in the tab? I don't have the tabs open, Mark and team. And maybe a poll for the group. This is we're at the halfway mark. I think this will be the natural place that we'll put our first poll. So we are going to launch a poll on the screen here. If you want to take a quick moment to answer 4 simple questions, we'd love to know, one, do you or your company use ArcGIS? How many remote sensing data sources are you currently using within your organization? How many teams, departments are using remote sensing data? And lastly, do you source any remote sensing data directly from providers? So if you want to just take a quick minute to fill that out, we'd appreciate it, and then we can move on. Okay, answers are flowing here. We'll just give another 5 or 10 seconds here, and then we'll close up the poll. So far, it looks like we're fairly 50-50 split on whether organizations use ArcGIS. It looks like the majority of people are in the 3 to 6 category of departments using remote sensing data. And again, predominantly, the answer is no on direct relationship with providers. A couple more seconds and let's close it off. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so to zoom out, the only other thing that we will table set with in reference to the enterprise features are user types and roles. So as we mentioned within the user journey, the first thing that you do is set up a project team typically. And within that, we've given you the ability to create users with different access points. So system administrators to readers, viewers, participants on a project with different rights and access points to the system was a critical feature, as we had feedback from groups saying that I don't want everybody to have the ability to purchase data. I don't want everybody to have the ability to work in depth with the data. I just need some people to view the data and a plethora of in-betweens and sort of access points. So we've built out the multi-user feature to say, okay, you can create groups, project teams that can be assembled and disbanded within EarthCache Enterprise, allowing for that ease of use across your project teams. Okay, and any other questions? So the next thing that comes up is questions on how do we get started? And how we get started is really quite simple. More specifically, people are asking, how much does this cost? And the easy answer is $750 per month for EarthCache Enterprise. And as a quick average exercise, we looked at, and this is very back of the napkin math, but using real averages, we looked at A, the cost of EarthCache Enterprise, and then B, what is the average cost for access to a single provider from both a contract management and overhead perspective, but also ongoing subscription costs. For a single provider, we averaged it out to about $800 a month, and that's for access to a single provider, let alone a dozen plus. The next thing that's going to cost something is distributing that imagery and processing it across the organization. And the last thing is these files are big. Storing that imagery on an ongoing basis has a cost to it. Again, very rough averages, but on a monthly basis, even if you were just doing a single data provider, the cost of EarthCache Enterprise just made a lot of sense. So we've intentionally made this an enterprise-wide license cost, meaning you can have as many users as you'd like as part of this, to make it easily accessible for organizations to take advantage of these features. Because ultimately, again, our goal is to get you access to the data you need and then make it easy for those within your organization to use it. And making that accessible from a price perspective is certainly part of that. So if this is of something of interest for you and your team, we have an early adopter program where we say, if you'd like to use it for 1 month, you can certainly go ahead and sign up for $750 for that month. And we don't need to extend it beyond that month. It's just a trial period. If after that trial period, you do want to launch into a full contract, we can set that up with an order form and get your organization moving. Part of the early adopter program is that we will set up an enablement room, and it's a virtual space where you get access to customer success, our product, and enablement consultants to help your group hit the milestones along that trial period. So very simple steps in terms of how you get started. And we're excited to hear from organizations who haven't yet been exposed to EarthCache Enterprise and are looking to get started. So with that, we'll double check if there's any other questions. And if not, and if there aren't any other comments from David, Kelly, Mark, we can wrap and send out the recording. Any parting thoughts? Going once, going twice? Yes, and we'll do our wrap-up poll as well. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions from the audience, we have one last poll to share before we wrap the presentation here. And it's a summary poll. So we'd love to know, A, do you see EarthCache Enterprise as something useful for your organization? And B, what additional information would help you adopt EarthCache Enterprise within your organization? And if there are answers that you don't see here as an option, just let us know in the chat. Give everyone a minute to fill this out, and then we will wrap. It looks like so far, overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. And it also looks like overwhelmingly a yes to a pilot and more information about data sources. I think we'll double down and agree with that. The feedback we've got from most prospects and organizations that we're working with is that they'd like more detailed information about what data is available through Skywatch. So we will take that away as a thing to do and make sure that, you know, those of you who have asked for this on the webinar get that information. Okay, just another 10 seconds and then we'll wrap this poll. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining, everybody. Recording to come. Feel free to distribute to anybody else, and we will follow up with those of you who have asked for the early adopter program and excited to kick things off with you. Take care.